Morning and rain. James woke up early, turned on his computer and went online to look at magazines. There were all kinds of magazines. About home, about girls, about cars. There was glamour in the magazines. Yeah. It was a fun time. The internet was a web of its own. Maybe it was because I had to find a girl on Facebook. Maybe it was just curiosity. But every morning was the same. Wet drops drummed on the plastic window. Yeah. There was a time, James thought. A bunch of girls he knew never married, and now to whom there were no options. Everyone was married with kids. Time passed. James was still sitting at his computer. He was 30. A good age. Plenty of energy and not so stupid anymore. Time was passing. Suddenly, he saw a photo on social media. It was nothing special, but his eyes were drawn to it. A gorgeous blonde with a lush shape, and her face was a classic beauty. He decided to offer her friendship and write to her. He just wrote to her, "Let's go to the cinema." 3 days later, she wrote back, "No, I'm married." James was very worried. After all, it was true virtual love. It's been about 6 months. And then, sometime in the winter, he went for a walk. He saw her face everywhere. "Why can't I be married?" he thought. That's how fate would have it. He wandered down the street, in his new down jacket, smoking and hardly looking round. Suddenly some brown-eyed brunette came up to him. "You don't have a lighter?" "Of course," he said. She walked away, swaying her hips. He stared at her for a long time. Yes, she's good. But not for me, James thought. Too good. Like that white sheepskin coat of hers. He came home and turned on the radio. He fell asleep to the music on the radio. He dreamed of a big city with beautiful girls and tall houses. It was a little creepy with the speed and the scale. And there he was looking at the girls. There was nothing to do for days. Music and internet, the usual. Life was good. But his parents were stressful. Family, so to speak. James has been bored lately. Time goes on and nobody is spared. No one will be spared. Only in the fantasies of the wild are there such lucky ones. Time passed, the memory wiped out. Home TV and other things. Time was doing its thing. James was bored frankly and not. He had 2 friends. We went out together to visit. But he didn't want to call them. All in his dreams. But that state of mind was passing. How about meeting a girl and forgetting everything? He decided. Because dreams are supposed to come true, it's got to be good. This day was special. He took a shower, ate at the cafeteria, and went to the park where the snow was melting. The thaw, so to speak. He was used to walking alone, less stressful. He walked and thought about his life. Yes, I'm young. I need to get married. He decided for the umpteenth time. Who doesn't want to live a beautiful life, he thought. The day is the same as the day before. Nothing new. Just find a girl, that's all. It's simple. Just make sure she loves and appreciates you. Yeah, that's a tough question. Whether it's rhetorical or not. The main thing is to get to know each other. I thought that when I was young. The gray snow squelched under my boots. James was out with his friends. They were bums unmarried too. Is a girl a good thing? He asked. The friends just laughed. It's spring soon. That's certainly a good thing, thought James. Outside, the girls wore tights and fancy jackets. They were dizzy from the way they walked. Yeah, positive. He smoked a Cante and looked around. Then he walked up the driveway and went home. He had a lot to do at home, too. What kind of life is that? Always searching and hungry for new experiences. like a blank book, like a black TV show, like a tabloid. It's not life, it's beneath it. James was considered an informal in college. Listened to rock. But serene times have changed that, too. Life is complicated. Life is not a field, he thought. It was his little loneliness. One beautiful sunny day, he went to a birthday party. There were some girlfriends from the birthday boy's uni. Yet, cool thought, her name was Mary. Mary and James became fast friends. Went to the movies. He gave her flowers. Walked to the park together. He bought her only the best ice cream. Time passed and then came a surprise. They kissed in the rain. She was 25. A brunette with a nice figure. He liked to look into her eyes. He often guessed what she wanted. He was lucky, that's a fact. Springtime in the city was great. Everything was going well. Sometimes it takes a small step to reach a goal, and people don't always make it. Fate gives us secret signs. Not everyone knows how to figure them out. James plus Mary. We're good.
One family's story.
I stood at the window and kept saying to myself, "Daughter, where are you?" And then a Toyota pulled up in front of our house. I had never seen such a car in our yard, and the door opened and Susan got out. My daughter got out of the car, waved to someone in the car and looked at our windows. I hid behind the curtain, not enough for Susie to see me standing there waiting for her at the window. But I was curious as to who my daughter had arrived with, and I looked out the window again from behind the curtain. My daughter was hugging a man with his back to me, but even from behind, I recognized Oliver's ex-husband. He sees his daughter only on weekends, takes her to all sorts of fun places and gives her gifts and allows everything. And then it takes me 2 days to bring Susie back to discipline. I hated to see my daughter smiling at her father. "Of course, darling," I said aloud to myself. "Of course it's easy to spend 1 day a week with a child. And you would try to do her homework, take her to classes and tidy up her things and toys. A couple more of these holidays on the weekend, and I'll turn into a wicked witch in the eyes of my daughter. What am I going to do with her?" Susie flew into the apartment, dropped her backpack in the hallway and screamed.
"Mom, did you see that?"
"I didn't see anything," I lied. What was I supposed to see?
"Daddy bought a new car. We've been driving around with him all day."
Squealed with delight, daughter.
"I loved it so much."
"I'm glad you had a good time. Now let's go to dinner."
"Mom, I don't want to eat. Dad and I had pizza. Can I go straight to bed?"
"Okay, wash up and go to bed," I said. When Susie was already lying in her bed, I remembered that she probably had not packed her bag for school tomorrow. "Daughter, did you pack your bag?"
"Well, Mom, I'll do it tomorrow."
Susan finished.
"Please."
I almost forced my daughter out of bed.
"Dad would never make me do that, but you're just messing with me."
I exhaled to calm myself down. "Daddy doesn't have your school things at home, so he never reminds you of them," I said to Susie as I watched her gather her notebooks. A few more weekends like this and my daughter would hate me. After all, with Daddy, she has eternal holidays, and with Mummy, she has daily chores. It's not hard to guess what's going to happen, and just 6 months ago, Oliver had no time for me or my daughter. That's what drove us to divorce. He'd come home from work every day, lie on the couch in front of the TV, and say,
"That's it, I'm not a human being, don't touch me until tomorrow."
And I, by the way, also worked and would not mind to rest in the evening. But I had time for my daughter and for the house to be clean and delicious food. And there was enough time for Oliver, and all he could think about was his work.
"Sarah, you don't understand me at all. You can only nag me. I work and I'm very tired, and you can't even take your daughter to the zoo alone."
With such words began our first serious quarrel. To be honest, it was a trick. My daughter had been asking to go to the zoo for a long time, and I told her, "When Daddy's free and the 3 of us go, okay? Will you wait a little while? But Daddy was always busy, and soon Oliver's busyness became the main topic of contention between us. 6 months later, I couldn't take it anymore. I packed my bags, took Susie's hand, and we left our house. The apartment was Oliver's, and I had no claim on it, so with my daughter, we have been living on a rented one for over a year now, and in that time, I haven't seen Oliver once. Sometimes we only call each other when it comes to my daughter. But lately, Oliver has started taking me away on weekends, and I've become jealous of my daughter's ex-husband, to be honest. That night, when my daughter was still nagging me about my demanding behaviour, I couldn't help myself, and when Susan fell asleep, I dialed Oliver's number and told him we needed to meet right away. The ex didn't even ask the reason. He just said that he was free tomorrow at lunchtime. And the next day, we sat in the park, on a bench, and I fell out previously rehearsed speech. Do you realise where this is going? I understand that you want to please Susie, but understand me. You're going to hurt your daughter, and that's it. You have no idea how hard it is to get her back on track. This has got to stop.
Yeah, that's a little over the top, but what do you suggest we do?
Let's switch for a while. I'll be Sunday Mom. You'll get to know what it's like to be in my shoes, I blurted out.
Okay, I agree.
Replied my ex-husband, but I didn't expect that answer. But I didn't take it back. Susan was so happy when I told her. She quickly packed her things and kissed me on the cheek goodbye.
Mom, don't miss me. Already on Saturday, I will come to you.
Said to me satisfied daughter and closed the door behind her. And I became so sad and lonely that I cried. What have I done? Without my daughter, I endured 2 of the longest weeks of my life. The first weekend, I looked forward to her, made a whole fridge full of food, and realised Oliver for the first time. He was probably as bored as I was, so he tried to cater to Susan's every whim. She came running in cheerfully and started excitedly telling me,
Mommy, Daddy and I are great. He's around all the time. He even left work early yesterday to take me to the pool, can you believe it? He takes care of me. He cooks me delicious food.
It's weird, because before he didn't even have time to read a bedtime story to the baby. The second weekend, my daughter and I were walking through the park, kicking colourful autumn leaves.
Mommy, look, there's Daddy.
I looked ahead. There was indeed Oliver standing there, looking sadly somewhere in the distance. Susan ran to him.
Hi, girls.
Oliver patted his daughter on the head and turned to me.
How are you doing?
Susie ran forward down the alley to the playground to the boys, and I turned to Oliver and said something. If you only knew how lonely I was without my daughter, and how much free time I had.
I had a different outlook on life. I was so lonely when you left. I'm much better now that Susan is with me 5 days a week, but on weekends I get sad again.
Oh, don't say anything. You have 2 sad days a week, but I have 5. As we were talking, I didn't notice my daughter sneaking up on us.
Mom, Dad, why don't we go to the zoo?
Oliver looked at me and nodded silently. And I've already pictured our dinner. Dinner for 3. I'd make potatoes for Susie, a salad for me, and Oliver would need a big piece of meat. I wonder if we can stop at the grocery store on the way.
Dad, give me your hand, and Mom, give me your hand. It's not like we're all together again. All my friends met their love at work. I, on the other hand, met my love on the transit system. I've never been lucky in matters of the heart, but one day it all changed. I take the subway to work on the same route. I'm already doing all the moves and actions on automatic. I always get into the same car, get off and go to another branch and get on the subway again. It's very convenient and easy. In the carriages, I like to read or listen to music to make the time pass unnoticed. That morning, it was my birthday. I went into the carriage as usual after the transition, and in the closing doors, a guy falls right on me.
Miss, excuse me, please.
He said, "It's okay," I said.
My name is Andrew, and you?
"Amelia?" I answered and thought to myself, why he decided to get acquainted with me.
Nice to meet you, Amelia. I've been watching you for a few days now.
I looked at him in surprise and thought to myself that maybe he was a maniac.
Don't think. I'm not watching you on purpose. We just travel the same route.
Is that why you decided to meet me?
Not only that, I like you, and I'd like to invite you for a cup of coffee and get to know you better.
I don't drink coffee.
Well then, for tea or cocoa with marshmallows.
Andrew smiled. I smiled back and agreed to meet.
Let's exchange phone numbers, I'll call you.
I came to work satisfied. The smile did not leave my face all day.
Why are you so happy?
My colleague Lucy asked me. Yes, I met a handsome guy. I shone.
Oh yeah? And where did you meet him?
You won't believe it. In the subway? I laughed.
You're kidding.
At lunchtime, Andrew called and suggested that we go for a walk in the park in the evening. I agreed. At lunch, the team congratulated me on my birthday, spoke many warm words to me, gave me a huge bouquet, and I treated them to cakes. The whole day, my phone was ringing off the hook. Someone was constantly calling to congratulate me, my relatives and friends. Many wished me to find a husband as soon as possible. By evening, my mood was even better, but I decided not to tell my new acquaintance that it was my birthday, because I was often abandoned before March 8th or February 14th. And now, I didn't want it to happen again. How long have you been following me on the subway? I asked Andrew when I met you.
I started traveling this route not so long ago. A couple of weeks ago, I was promoted and transferred to another branch. I'm a senior manager at a telecom store. I noticed you in the crowd. You have a very interesting route, so I started following it.
And you just wanted to meet me?
No, you're a very beautiful girl, and I liked you, so I was interested in you.
That's very nice to hear. Where shall we go for cocoa and marshmallows? Andrew turned to the first cafe he saw and opened the door, gesturing for me to come inside. We sat down at a table by the window. The sun was just setting outside, flooding the cafe with pink light. How beautiful everything looks at sunset, I said.
Amelia, you're a poet. Maybe you write poetry too?
I wrote a couple of notebooks when I was a student.
You're a unicum. I like you more and more.
Andrew smiled and began to tell about his first love in kindergarten. You're really something? You still remember about her? I was surprised.
I remember. But most of all, I remember how I gave her my car to play with, and she didn't return it, and that's it. Love is gone.
We both burst out laughing. Anyway, it was a wonderful evening. The next day, he didn't call. Second day, third day, week. I didn't understand why he did it, and I walked around gloomy. Lucy brought me a cup of tea at lunchtime. Why did he do that to me? It's not fair, I complained to my friend.
What if he turned out to be a regular pickup artist?
A what?
A guy who picks up girls and then dumps them. There's even a course for guys like that.
I don't know. He doesn't look like one. I sighed.
How can you tell if he does or not? You've never met one.
Yeah, so there's no hope, is there?
I guess so.
It's been over a month since I met Andrew. I tried to forget about him. But one day, going down to the subway and entering the car, I heard a familiar voice.
Amelia, wait!
I turned around and saw Andrew running towards me through the crowd. I didn't expect to see you, I muttered to myself.
Amelia, I'm sorry. I don't know what you thought of me, but I don't think it was anything good.
Andrew said with a face that made me realize he was really sorry.
Can we talk somewhere where it's not so noisy? I'll explain everything to you.
Well, let's try. We're getting off right now, so we'll talk on the way, I said. We got out of the subway and went to a small square. There were not many people there, so we sat down on a free bench.
Thank you for agreeing to listen to me. I'll explain why I didn't call you.
Really? I had so many things going on in my head, you know.
I'm sorry, but I really couldn't call you. When I came back after meeting you, I first went down to the subway and then took the bus. I dozed off on the bus, and then I woke up and jumped off at my station, leaving my backpack on the seat.
Wow, I sympathized. And what? Didn't find it later?
I found it at the Lost and Found. But they returned it without money and phone. It looks like someone took it from the subway. I filed a police report, but what's the use? That's why I couldn't call you. I kept looking for you on your route, but you weren't there. I've been looking for you on the subway for a month, and today I got lucky.
Wow.
Did you change jobs? No, we met on the old route today. Have you been sick?
No, I'll try to explain it to you. There's too much going on, and I don't know where to start.
Start with the most important thing. Tell me if you like me.
Andrew asked and looked me straight in the eyes. I do, I smiled. You couldn't meet me on the subway because I've been commuting to work by car for a month now. It was my birthday on the day we met, and after our meeting, I went to my parents and they let me drive their car for a month because I had just recently passed my license and was wondering if I needed a car now. And last night, I gave the car back to my parents. That's why I'm back on the same route.
You can't make this up on purpose.
Andrew laughed. I thought you didn't like me,
Happy last birthday.
Andrew said, and then he reached up and kissed me softly.
It was a beautiful summer morning. The sun had just risen from the horizon. Bright light illuminated the streets, and the warmth of the sun's rays began to warm the city. The delicate smell of the night's freshness could still be felt in the air. The wind roamed lightly and unobtrusively through the city, occasionally disturbing the leaves on the branches of large trees. Large, marvelously white and fluffy clouds floated across the sky. The streets were almost empty. Everyone was still enjoying their sleep. Only rare passers-by appeared on the streets and in a good mood walked in a direction unknown to anyone, enjoying the gift of nature. There was an intoxicating aroma of love in the air. Everything around seemed to be filled with love. At that moment, someone's shadow slid across the ground. A strange creature hovered over the city and after a while crouched on the edge of a cloud. If it weren't for the snow-white wings behind his back, he could have been called an ordinary man. He looked to be about 18 years old or so. He had blonde hair that shimmered with a golden hue in the sunlight, and his cheerful gaze and mischievous smile never left his face. Chattering his legs playfully and looking down, Cupid sat on a cloud and looked for new hearts that had not yet been hit by his arrows. Once again, sitting on the cloud, he saw a marvelous couple. He looked at their joyful faces, and with his piercing gaze, he saw two hearts beating in unison with each other. Cupid gathered his courage and released the two arrows in turn. The fire of love flared up in the two hearts, love tender and affectionate, love full of care and understanding, eternal love. The couple slowed down, and after a moment they looked at each other. Mutual declarations of love were heard, and their lips touched in a tender kiss. But Cupid, sitting on the cloud, saw that in that kiss not only their lips, but also their souls touched. It is at such moments that the most beautiful love is born, Amour thought, and collapsed on the cloud, which, as always, was warm and soft. He had been falling in love with people for so long that he remembered how eras changed, how this world changed. He flew everywhere. Under his wings, cold snows were replaced by impassable forests. Dry and hot deserts were replaced by endless seas and oceans. He flew from city to city to give people the most beautiful and priceless feeling: love. The meaning of his long life was to give happiness to people, and he could not imagine himself without it. With his arrows, he aimed at people's hearts, and hitting them made their lives completely different. He gave them an incomparable feeling, from which each person was covered with euphoria, and there was a feeling of growing wings and want to fly into the sky and shout to the whole world that you are in love. This was his simple, but at the same time very responsible job. He didn't remember when it all started, when he took a bow and arrow in his hands. But since then, he was happy to give love to people and was always happy when he changed someone's life for the better. He could no longer imagine his life without this work. Until one sunny evening, there was a meeting that changed his whole life. One day, Cupid was sitting on a cloud as usual, looking for new hearts. The sun was gently caressing him. There were people wandering around below. His gaze could not stop on anyone. None of the people passing below were ready for love. They just didn't care about love. Lately, people had been thinking about anything but love. Love didn't interest them. Some thought about money and career, some about survival in this world, some about power and fame. But no one thought about love. It was gone from their hearts. That's when he noticed her. She was about 16 years old. There was something special about her. She stood out from the crowd of gray people. Cupid couldn't figure out what it was that made her so special, what made her different from the rest. But he knew for sure it was that there was something about her that caught his eye. He became curious as to what would happen to this unique little person in the future. From time to time, Cupid would find her again and watch her as she went to her studies, as she went home, as she went out for a walk. In the late evenings when she returned home, he would part the clouds so that the moon would light her way. On cold evenings, he would ask the sun to warm her more, and on hot summer days, the cool breeze would follow her at Cupid's request. Before his eyes, the little child was transforming into a beautiful girl. 4 years had passed since he had first noticed her. She had changed greatly, and like the bud of a marvelous, graceful flower that had just bloomed and revealed its full beauty to the world, she was astonishing the world with her beauty. He felt that there were no words in the whole world to describe her beauty. She was an amazing, unique person. Her look, her smile, her gait, her every breath, and every beat of her heart, everything about her was special and beautiful. Now, seeing her on the street, Cupid felt a kind of trembling inside him. He couldn't understand what had happened to him, what was happening to him when he saw her. All his thoughts were mixed up in his head. He lost track of the days. His whole mind was looking for her. He couldn't live a day without her cheerful smile, her happy gaze. Every day, Cupid sent her air kisses. He sent them with the wind, with raindrops that, touching her, kissed her instead of him. In the winter, little snowflakes gently touching her face sent his kisses. It took Cupid a long time to realize that the same thing had happened to him as to those whom his arrows had hit. He had fallen in love. Now he understood how people felt when they were in love. Cupid had finally learned what happiness his arrows brought. Foolish. Then he did not realize that for happiness, it is not enough to love yourself. It is necessary that the love was mutual, and without reciprocity of this beautiful feeling, instead of a great gift, turns into a terrible curse. He wanted to be near her and feel her love, but one thing prevented him. She was a human being. And what was he? He was Cupid. They were different. Their entire relationship was impossible beforehand. They could never be near each other and enjoy love. He realized that, but he couldn't accept it. Sometimes he just wanted to be human, to become an ordinary human being, to share a short human life with her. He had watched for years as many decent young men had felt sympathy for her, but without reciprocation, they had soon left her, leaving her alone. This loneliness crushed and depressed her. Cupid saw her condition getting worse and worse day by day. He could no longer see that the girl he loved madly was suffering because of him. He didn't want that suffering. However, the mere thought of firing an arrow into her heart, of falling madly in love with her, set up a terrible hurricane of emotions in his soul, which did not die down in him for a long time and tormented his loving heart. One morning he decided that he could not go on like this, that this vicious circle must be broken. Cupid realized that no one would ever love her as much as he did, but he knew it was better this way. He sat on the edge of the cloud. Each heartbeat brought him closer to the inevitable. With every second, his heart beat faster and faster. And then she appeared. She wasn't alone. Next to her walked a young man a little older than her. They were walking, holding hands, and in their eyes you could see the joy of having each other. Some invisible thread was binding their lonely hearts together. Cupid took his last breath. His heart, which had been beating at a frantic speed, suddenly froze, and only his cold, detached gaze gave away what was going on in his soul. Standing on the cloud, Cupid took out 2 arrows and aimed them at the 2 lonely hearts. Both arrows hit the target, first striking his heart and then hers. A quiet sigh escaped her lips. Cupid saw a spark of happiness in her heart that would soon ignite into a huge flame called love. Cupid stood motionless. Only a single tear slowly ran down his cheek and dripped onto a cloud, which began to darken rapidly, turning into a cloud. Soon it began to rain, an extraordinary rain. Each drop contained an incredible amount of Cupid's feelings, his emotions, his suffering. Suddenly lightning struck, and thunder announced to the world the birth of a new love. His heart was filled with terrible pain, the pain of loss and bereavement. He had lost his love forever before he could feel the mutual feeling. Only one thought served to comfort him, the thought that she was happy now. He wanted to make her happy, because for him the happiness of this little person was much more important than his own, and he did it, though he had to pay for it very dearly. The gentle sun shone brightly outside. Cupid lay on a cloud, trying not to think about anything or anyone. The once warm and soft clouds that had served as his home now seemed very cold and hard. He lay there and thought about the fact that somewhere down there on the ground, there was a marvelous girl walking around, whom he had made happy. He no longer believed that love could work miracles. He could no longer give it to people as he had done for so many years. He realized that with his arrows, he could make people not only happy, but insanely unhappy. Cupid stood up, walked to the edge of the cloud, and took one last look at the world, a bird's eye view. With a light movement of his wings, he soared and flew down. He wanted to love like a simple man. He lacked love, love tender, light, selfless, mutual love. For the first time in his long life, he stood on the ground, on this sinful earth. He walked on it, and knew that if he chose to do so now, he could never go back. And so he made his choice. When he reached the alley, Cupid turned into it, and the further he walked, the darker it became. Darkness enveloped the entire alley. He stopped, and feeling the cold breeze, closed his eyes. Opening them, Cupid saw a door. Opening it slightly, he saw a small room. Cupid took a few steps and stopped. There was a marvelously white room in front of him, a slightly sweet scent flying in the air. He realized that if he did this, he would never fly again, never sit on a cloud and forever forget everything that had come before. He would forget everything except one thing, except what love meant, love bright and beautiful. Cupid took a confident step, and the door slammed forever behind his back. He turned around. The feathers from his wings began to slowly fall to the floor. Cupid placed his bow and arrows beside him. His consciousness was drifting away, and after a moment he dissolved into the white haze enveloping the room. The bow, arrows, and many snow-white feathers left from his wings remained on the floor. The next day, someone else with wings took the bow and arrows and flew to the same cloud to give love to people again, and a child was born on earth, a small child with the soul of Cupid, a soul capable of loving without limits, and to give people that love.
I'd love for you to share my memories with me. It all started in the spring. Bright sunshine, sweet fresh air, the love that turned my head back then.
Hi, I'm James. What's your name?
Emily, I said with a smile. You rode off again on your new bike, leaving me alone on the playground. Later, I found out that you were dating my best friend and you wanted to continue your relationship with her again. It was a rainy May evening. My friend and I went outside for a walk. Seeing a group of our old childhood friends, we decided to wait and walk together. You were in this company with us. We somehow broke into pairs. It turned out so that I was together with you. We walked holding hands, talking about everything. After that night, me, you, and my friend Camila, the three of us went out. Camila, my best friend, had a mad dash over to my house for advice about you, James. Her eyes were twinkling and sparkling. She asked me to set you two up together because she's shy. I know she liked you a lot. Do you remember when you came to me a week later and asked me the same thing? You looked into my blue eyes and smiled and asked me to arrange a meeting for you. Yes, I was a very loyal friend then, which I remain to this day, and even though I developed a liking for you, James, I arranged a meeting for you and more than one. You started seeing each other. Later that summer, I realized that I love you, James. It was so strong, I couldn't even imagine such a thing. I dreamed about you. You'd come over every night and the three of us would go out. You would caress your friend, kiss her in front of me, and I would sit peacefully on a bench with you and contemplate. My soul was torn, tears came to my eyes. You'd ask me what happened, and I'd reply that I had a speck in my eye. I lay awake nights thinking about you. I loved you and wanted to be near you. I wanted you with all my soul. With my friend you often quarreled, and I reconciled you. I do not know why. I just wished happiness to my friend, and in no case did not want you to know the truth. The truth of my sincere, pure, and unadulterated love. I didn't dare to even think about you being mine, being with me, kissing my hot lips, whispering tender words. I dreamed, and the dreams were only in me. You were my secret. You were my reality. I lived you. In the summer evenings, we would sit on the slabs of an abandoned construction site. You would play the guitar, and Camila and I would sing songs. The guys would admire us. You didn't know that I was singing only for you. My loving heart and soul was singing for you. She asked, "Guess my love." When everyone dispersed and we were alone on those slabs, looking up at the starry night sky and talking about love, about life, about friendship, about many things, about everything. I told myself no matter what it took, but I would change myself and he would still love me. I was a chubby girl, beautiful. I was embarrassed by my fullness and decided to lose weight. Over the summer, I lost 10 pounds. I ate very little, running in the early morning. By the fall, I was a different person. We didn't see each other much during the summer. Do you remember the first time you saw me after the summer and smiled? Yes, you remember everything. Nobody recognized me. I started a party life. I was always around you. You noticed me. You liked me. I remember how many guys were hitting on me at the time, but you were my target. My circle of acquaintances was all male, and I was the only one in it. All the girls I knew were jealous. I dated the most famous guys in our town that girls dreamed about, and I was easy with them, but I wouldn't let anyone have sex with me. I was saving myself for you. I've been waiting for this moment. You changed girls like a glove. You forgot about Camila a long time ago. I was there for you, but I was only outwardly unavailable. We didn't speak for a year. In January, you tried to reconcile, but I was adamant. You started looking for a meeting with me, and I was depressed, and I was really worried about it internally. I didn't want to be with you just once or twice. I suffered. I wanted to be with you always. I loved you. One day after a walk, I was coming home. There you were, with a friend.
Hi, Emily. Just what I needed. Let's talk.
Okay, walk me home and we'll talk. Your friend stayed at the meeting point and we went to my house. I didn't expect this turn of events.
Emily, I love you. Let's go out.
Oh my God, really? I've been waiting for this for like my whole life. I love you too, James. We kissed for a long time. He was mad with passion and love for me. He started calling me all the time. I got very sick and he sat under my house and called me to come out to him. It was a very romantic and pure love. Other than James, no one ever reciprocated. There were a lot of guys who loved me, but you alone, became my wish come true and reality. We dated for 7 months. The last few months you started disappearing, not answering your phone and being forever busy. That last night I dragged you drunk out of a nightclub. We walked through the park. You didn't look into my eyes like before. You didn't want to touch me or explain anything. I asked you to tell me and explain everything to me. And you said these words that still resonate clearly in me. You'll find someone else better than me. We have to break up. Tears came to my eyes. I didn't want you to see them. My head was racing. All I could think of was to run, hurry. I had to get away from here. Forget him. Never see him again. He broke my heart. My love was dead. I ran through the evening city. I ran home. Tears flooded my eyes. I could hardly see. There were crowds of people walking in the center of the city on this terrible evening, including couples in love. I crashed into them, smashing them and pushing them away from each other. They were in pain, but not as much as I was. It was a terrible humiliation and the loss of everything that was sacred and dear to me. I didn't want to live. The world became black and white. I didn't want anything. I was depressed. No psychologist could cope with my pain. I spent 2 months in the hospital as I didn't even want to eat. Doctors fought for my life. One day my heart stopped beating, but I was saved. I was there, in another world. I was on my way to the light, but something brought me back again. They said it was too soon. I started to get better, slowly came back to life. I overcame myself. James, my neighbor, he lives very close, but after all these years, we don't even say hello to each other. My friend betrayed me. She slung mud at me in front of all our friends. I didn't and don't hold a grudge. She has hated me all her life and envied me because she has never been asked to date by guys, and I was a favorite and friend to many guys. I totally understand my friend in the past. God judge her. After all these events, my life changed, and the starting point was love. But still, I am grateful to fate and life that gave me to go through all this. I became stronger and smarter. I met my true and mutual love. I'm happy, and the past no longer causes me pain. It was just sad, although it all gave me the opportunity to meet a new love forever, which healed my heart.
The night. He loved the night. Even though autumn had already taken over, it was still warm and gentle in the summer. The stars on the dark blanket of the sky wove their intricate pattern, and even the city's illumination could not outshine their light. The silver Bentley raced along the night streets and avenues devoid of daytime traffic jams. The man gripped the steering wheel tightly, so that his knuckles turned white, and his foot pressed harder and harder on the gas, as if he were running away from something. He had run away from a social gathering and he didn't want to go home, so he was driving around the city, and his wife was probably already home. They say that marriages are made in heaven. That's certainly not the case with him, and certainly not with his wife. When he realized that he didn't love her as well as she loved him, it's hard to say. Maybe right away, maybe a little later, that's not the point. The point is that it was convenient for them. He had always been a part of her life, a backdrop, a piece of interior. It wasn't her fault. He let her see him that way. Well, how could it be otherwise when there is a woman to whom you can always come back and, saying a meaningless "I love," be pampered, and then again to go on a binge, not caring at all about the pain you cause this? Further, it becomes a habit, and every year you are drawn into this maelstrom more and more. You forget even that once loved this woman. Although now there is a reasonable question. Did you love at all? Yes, wrongly loved or not, rather was a boyishly in love. Then everything went like smoke from white apples. Here, and she was tired of waiting for him, and nevertheless, the more he cheated on her, the more she wanted to bind to herself. Bind him like a pedigree dog, putting him on a chain in a kennel. And even though she didn't really need him a long time ago, and all because at the time of the wedding, so it was convenient for everyone, she got what she had been seeking for so long, that is, him and he, stability in business and relations with relatives. That's how simple it is. A deal in which both sides are covered by love. At first, it's fun to beat yourself with your fist in the chest and say the memorized "I love you." Then the movements become less emotional and in the voice slips falseness, and then and even at all you do with a tired uh-huh for the question, do you love? That's how it is. And he doesn't want to go home at all, and in principle, it doesn't matter whether she is waiting there or not. She, however, doesn't care either. Nobody is to blame here, or both are to blame, or maybe he is the only one. And in fact, he got a wonderful woman. But most likely that in the heavenly office messed up and next to her name is clearly not his. So, what do we do now? Wander around in this labyrinth or run? Although with all the desire to run away will not be possible, here we need drastic measures. Well, it's easy to say so, and advice is also easy to give. But go and explain to your wife that he's fed up with this masquerade. Immediately reproaches will begin. She will recall all his sins, tell what a scoundrel and a bastard he is, as if he himself does not know it. And however, no one and never in his surroundings did not bend to remind him once again about failures, to prick more painfully. No, this is not life in human society. It is an existence in a terrarium, where every woman is a spectacled cobra, and the men are all scorpions. But he is also far from white and fluffy, and also can inject his portion of poison. But how tired of it. I want something simple and human, but where to get it? Certainly not here, where everyone sees him as a walking ATM or a business partner. And what about your soul? Yeah, who needs it? Your soul, your wife, parents, friends. All these not cheerful thoughts painfully reflected on his handsome face, and his hands gripped the steering wheel even tighter. The man suddenly felt an incredible need for fresh air. Where is he now? It seemed that the sign of the subway station had just flashed. What a mess he had gotten himself into, and he was trying to convince someone that he wasn't running. A grim grin contorted his face, giving it a kind of doom. Then he blinked a few times, driving away unwelcome thoughts, and looked into the night-lit streets. Now the car was not flying, but slowly, rustling its tires, creeping along the asphalt. Pulling over to the curb, the man put his head down on the steering wheel and took a few deep breaths. It didn't help much. He got out of the car, stepping slowly and cautiously on the sidewalk. Rather automatically than caring about the safety of the car, he turned on the alarm and, thoughtfully twirling the keys in his hand, headed for the park. It is not known how long he wandered along the dark alleys, illuminated by the faint light of the miraculously surviving lanterns, but one of them led him to the river. Was it a coincidence or a real opportunity to solve all the problems in one fell swoop? The man staggered at this prospect. He had to sit down immediately. He looked around. Somewhere, there seemed to be a bench visible. Damn, why is it so dark? He took a few steps, so it seems to be busy. Obeying the inner need for human companionship, went on. Indeed, on the bench sat a girl or a young woman. In the darkness, it is difficult to make out, shivering around her shoulders and looking at the dark waters of the river. It was dark enough, but somehow he knew exactly where her gaze was directed. Struggling a little, the man asked in a suddenly hoarse voice, "May I?" She, without even looking at him, without even turning her head, nodded slowly, and he sat down. There was silence, but there was no awkwardness, but a feeling that they had known each other for a long time and they didn't even need to talk. He didn't know why, but he too fixed his gaze on the darkness of the river. There were either docks or a wharf on the opposite bank, but there was a lot of light there, and there were all these lights glinting in the water, making it not scary but rather tantalizingly appealing, and not even in the sense of wanting to dive into this colored whirlpool, but it was just hard for him to take his eyes off such a simple splendor. All thoughts faded, and he didn't even want to think about anything. Still silently, he looked at this unhurried stream until a quiet voice brought him out of his trance.
Is it really addictive?
suddenly asked the girl again without turning her head. It even seemed to the man that there was something wrong with her head. But the next words displaced that thought.
I don't want to give up my life. There are a lot of pleasant things in it, but there are nights like tonight. It's my friend's birthday, and I've been invited. But what for? I feel like I'm in a hen house. Guys are like roosters, fluffing their tails and trying to prove their superiority by humiliating the other, girls. But, however, what difference does it make when you, the real you, few people are interested? Why is it necessary to be the most self that you would be appreciated, respected, and loved? Why do you have to conquer something, building yourself up to be something you are not? Why don't people love you because you are you and there is no other like you? And why do you have to lose in order to realize how dear you were lost? So many whys, and where are the answers? Maybe there.
The girl nodded at the water,
And maybe here?
and a hand rested on her chest.
But alas, there are no answers. And ordinary girls will go out of their way to be noticed, not realizing that there are no ordinary people in the world. Everyone, absolutely everyone, is unique. Perhaps it's only me who thinks so, because I, with my uniqueness, nobody needs. And beautiful, successful, and rich sneered at this uniqueness.
The girl was silent for a second and then, turning sharply in his direction, muttered,
I'm sorry. I've told you something unknown, don't pay attention. It's just that I rarely communicate with people.
No, not at all. The man was suddenly embarrassed. You said all the right things, but may I make a small correction? Beautiful, rich, and successful also want to be loved, but not for their beauty, success, and money, but for their, as you say, uniqueness.
I wish I had such a prince.
The girl hummed, but it even seemed to the man that in the darkness of the alley he saw a smile sliding on her lips. But I left my slipper and ball gown at home. Not a problem. He deftly jumped up from the bench and jokingly bowed and said, Allow me to introduce myself. Prince.
Cinderella.
The girl stood up and sat down in a kneeling position.
Just Cinderella.
Well, and seriously, the man smiled the most sincere smile for the last few years. My name is...
She looked at her watch. 10 more minutes. Never before had she ever gotten to a date before the appointed time. She was always and everywhere late. But this date was unusual. It was the first and the last. If he doesn't show up... She stomped her foot nervously, knocking snow off her boot. Stop it! He'll come! Her heart pounded, forgetting its rhythm, then stopped, then thudded so hard that her eyes began to darken. For the third time, she pulled out her powdered face and scrutinized her face. Her cheeks were flaming. She powdered once more. Her eyes glittered like a lunatic's and seemed black because of her dilated pupils. What if he doesn't like me now? After all, my hair was longer and lighter back then. What the hell does it matter if he likes me or not? I'll never know anyway. Her heart ached again and choked with hopeless longing. She'd been living with this feeling for 6 months now. It had become her companion. Rare snowflakes drifted down from the sky, but she did not notice them. She was back in the past summer. She squinted against the sun and felt the hot wind flutter her hair. Her head is buzzing with champagne and the joy of having him around. She doesn't know his name yet, but she already knows she will never forget his eyes. Their gazes meet again. She looks away again. Who and when did she get it into her head that you should turn up your nose and look away if a man is looking at you? God forbid he should think she was interested in him. They were both guests at the wedding. She on the bride's side, he on the groom's side. Everything about the wedding annoyed her. The fuss, the chatter, the ostentatious tears, the banal toasts, the disgustingly warm champagne. She wished the evening would just end, until she saw him, He stood a little apart from all the guests and quietly watched them. He seemed so different from everyone she knew. He was different from them, taller than average and with an athletic build. But most importantly, she felt it rather than saw it, and he had a calm, confident air about him that she'd never had before. From that moment on, everything around her faded, hushed. Everything centered on him. They met, sat next to each other, laughed. He addressed her as you. It was so unusual that at first she even looked away, wondering who else he was asking for a slow dance. When she realized that "May I invite you" was addressed only to her, she laughed heartily and gave him her hand. To this day, her hand remembered the warmth of his palm. She had been poking him unceremoniously all evening, and he had never once said "you" to her. She'd expected anything but such restraint and respect. What had her life become if basic politeness seemed like a luxury? She was angry with herself for her abruptness and ostentatious independence. She could feel his attentive, scrutinizing gaze. He was listening to her, but he was not saying what she most wanted to hear. She left the wedding alone, defiantly turning away at his offer to call a cab. Pressing her heated forehead against the cold glass of the hitchhiker's window, she cursed him, herself, the world. She didn't go to the second day of the wedding, saying she'd had too much to drink the night before, and now she felt sick. To see him again meant certain doom. She forbade herself to remember his eyes, his hands, his voice, but every night she broke that prohibition. When her consciousness began to shut down, falling asleep, she saw his face clearly. Burying her face in the pillow, she fell into a dream like an abyss and saw his face again. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that she admitted to herself that she had fallen in love and began to kill that love. It took everything. Self-hypnosis, the voice of reason whispering angrily, "Do you remember how your previous love ended? Haven't you had enough?" She racked her brain to the limit, thinking up more and more elaborate ways to bring her body and mind to the point of exhaustion, where only one thing could be seen: a pillow. Business, meetings, studies, one course, another, the constant rush, the eternal lack of sleep. One day replaced another, weeks flew by like dry leaves. But love only grinned. She forbade herself to think about him, but at the same time she was running through hundreds of options in her head, how to find him. She found out, through the husband of a friend whose wedding they had met, his address, phone number, profession, habits. Everything but one: did he need her? To hear no, she was afraid. She hoped for a chance meeting that would change everything. Fate grants every man a certain number of miracles. It seemed that she had long ago wasted her rightful share of miracles. And now she stood in the middle of the snow-covered park and felt her heart freeze with each passing minute. Tomorrow she would board the train and leave forever for another city, another country. Never would she see him again, never. The word pounded in her head like a hammer, and before its ruthlessness, all far-fetched fears, hesitations, and the most common cowardice receded. She had called him yesterday. He remembered her, appointed a place and time to meet. He was surprised, but agreed. She had been up all night. She looked at the clock. He was already 4 minutes late. Maybe the clock was rushing again. She looked at her blue from the cold. She had forgotten her gloves in her haste, perfectly manicured hands, and suddenly realized that nobody wanted her, all so well groomed, perfectly dressed and combed. This thought acted like a catalyst, and hundreds of similar ones burst into her brain. They wriggled, frenzied, smirking and screaming, drowning each other out. "He'll never come. You'll never see him again. He never liked you. You know you should never impose on a man. You should never call him first. Never, never, never." She closed her eyes, wishing only to die, to disappear, to vaporize, to never feel this pain again. Snowflakes fell over her eyes, melting, mixing with her mascara and running down her face. She felt like wiping all the paint off her face. She bent down, picked up a handful of snow, brought it to her face and suddenly heard behind her back.
Just don't eat it.
She turned around and saw him. He was smiling.
My throat will be sore. I'm sorry I'm a little late. Aren't you cold?
She was numb. She stood looking into his eyes, snow melting in her hands.
Your paint's a little blotchy.
He touched her cheek and wiped it gently.
Why aren't you saying anything?
She looked down at her wet hands, looked up at him. He's tall, taller than her even now that she's in heels. Handsome, too much so, and answered, I really wanted to see you. I'm so happy right now. I know that you and I will never see each other again, so I can tell you everything now. I love you. All these months I've been living with the thought of seeing you again. I don't know why you came or how you feel right now. I just want to spend this day with you. Half an hour, an hour. I'm leaving tomorrow, and you and I will never see each other again. She looked into his eyes, not afraid to read her judgment in them now. She was not afraid of anything now. He was silent. He smiled, took her hand.
Your hands are freezing cold. Let's go somewhere warm. I have a lot to tell you too.
He took off his gloves and gave them to her. Her heart warmed along with her hands. Now she knew it would never freeze again. Never again.